Would you like to know some shocking things about living in Florida? Stay tuned. Hey everybody, it's Andy G with the Emerald Group right here on the Emerald Coast in Florida. For those of you who are returners to the channel, you might notice things look a little different. We're in the middle of moving into a new office and we don't have our sort of YouTube-y station set up yet, but we're working on it. So if you're new here, expect changes. But if you are interested in learning about the Emerald Coast, moving down here, general information, stick around and feel free to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a video. But for today, we're just going to talk about some things that surprised me when I moved back to Florida. A little bit of backstory. I was actually born in Panama City, but when I was very young, my family moved first to Mississippi and then up to Northern Virginia, and that's where I spent most of my life. So while I've always considered myself a Florida girl, I didn't actually live here very much. And then, I came back for a couple of vacations to visit my extended family, but I did not come to Florida and spend any significant time here until 2017. And then we moved here a year later. So you can see it made an impression. But I was only here as a tourist, first as a child and then as an adult, and I didn't really understand what I was in for. The culture here is just very different from where I lived just outside the Washington, D.C. Beltway. The pace of life, the general, just everything about this place is really different. So let's talk specifics. The first thing that got to me was what passes for business attire in Florida. When I got my real estate license down here and I went in to interview with the first brokerage I worked for, I was legit wearing a suit. You can see I am not currently wearing a suit. The woman I interviewed with was wearing white capri pants and flip-flops with plastic flowers glued to them. And it wasn't even Friday. So you can imagine what casual Friday is like. But it was just, if I had been interviewing for a position in Northern Virginia and I was dressed the way the woman interviewing me was dressed, I would not have made it past the lobby. So I actually really love that about Florida. You don't have to be super dressed up in order to get a job. I know lawyers who do not like wearing suits at all, and they almost never have to, especially with so much of court being on Zoom now. They think khakis and polos are dressing up. You will meet people who are very professional, very good at their jobs, who are wearing, sleeveless shirts and shorts and flip-flops to work. I am currently wearing a pair of, for me at this point, dress shoes. They're knockoff Doc Marten slides with flowers on them. You've seen the way that Andrew dresses in his videos. He wears t-shirts all the time. That's not for YouTube. That's just how he dresses. One of the really cool things about that is that there's a much lower barrier to work. You don't have to have a professional wardrobe in order to get a professional job. So if you are someone who is, starting over or you're just entering your career, you don't have to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars on, nice wardrobe, at least around here. That's what it's like on the Panhandle. I can't speak for like Miami or Orlando. I have not lived there, but I think it's wonderfully egalitarian because at a glance, you can't tell someone who lives on a farm in Baker versus someone who owns one of those, $10 million houses out on 30A. Good luck figuring out who's who. But I just love that about this place. I love that I can wear jeans and t-shirts and sleeveless shirts, and I'm a big fan of the flip-flops. So I own more flip-flops than anything else. I don't think I own a pair of closed-toed shoes that aren't my, sneakers. So that's the first thing, is business attire. Because I'm wearing business attire right now. This t-shirt is fine. It's great. Okay, number 2 is a little bit embarrassing, so I'm gonna get it out of the way. I did not realize how much water there was on the Panhandle. I know, okay, I know now. But because of where I grew up, I had this thing in my head of, to get to water, you have to go to the beach. And the beach is over there, and that's where all the water is. Well, when you live at sea level, literally chuck a rock and you're gonna hit water. It's not just the Gulf, by the way. If you do come down here, remember that you are going to the Gulf, not to the ocean. It does not help to point out that the Gulf is part of the ocean. The locals will still make fun of you. Lesson I learned the hard way. But it's not just the Gulf, it's also the Sound and the bays and the bayous and the rivers and the creeks and the streams, and it's everywhere. I live in Crestview. There is no beach in Crestview, but there's an awful lot of water. There is so much waterfront property in Crestview because of all of the ponds and rivers and lakes. So there is water everywhere. and there are all sorts of water activities to do, not just laying out on the beach or splashing in the Gulf or Sound, not ocean, but there's also all of the paddleboarding and kayaking and all of that. So there is water everywhere, even if you're not a beach fan, but you want to, paddle a canoe or learn how to paddleboard or anything like that. You're gonna have a good time. If you don't like the water, move to Florala. It's a joke, but it's also kind of true. Okay, number 3 on my list is boats. Goes along with the water. There are boats everywhere. Again, I should not have been surprised, but I spent most of my life in Northern Virginia where a boat was a status symbol. You could impress someone by saying you owned a boat. You will impress no one by saying you own a boat here. I think half the people here own a boat. It's not just about owning a boat, but you can also just rent a boat for a day. You can rent a pontoon. They have these really cool ones that are double layered and they actually have a slide and you'll see those out in the Sound area especially. I'm gonna have to get me one of those one day. There's also, dolphin watching tours and sunset cruises and fishing tours. You can hire someone, or if you know how to drive a boat, you can do it yourself. But a lot of folks like me are not interested in learning how to pilot a boat. I will much prefer to have someone else who knows what they're doing drive me around so I can look at the dolphins without worrying about hitting one. So again, there's boats everywhere and everything from little paddle boats on up to giant, gorgeous yachts. It's a whole thing. There's boats everywhere. And number 4 goes along with the boats is fishing. I lived in Northern Virginia. I lived in West Virginia when I was in college. And I knew people who fished, but I have never before in my life lived in a place where people fish off every bridge I cross practically. Especially in Fort Walton Beach, there are signs. There are little sidewalks and there are signs that say don't fish between these poles because that's where the boats go underneath the bridge. But you have people on either side. It's really fun when you go out there and you see 6 or 7 people fishing off the same bridge and there's one of those big herons I'm waiting, I'm gonna get one of those fish. They steal from you. Be careful because they're big birds and they will totally steal your fish. But you can go fishing. Again, you can charter one of those boats and you can go out on an all-day fishing trip and then you can come home and clean it and cook it. If you're into that kind of thing. Some of us prefer our fish pre-caught and pre-clean, which leads me into my next thing, which is number 5, fish markets. Seafood everywhere. I kind of figured the seafood was for the tourists. That was another thing that's a little bit silly in retrospect, but their big industry around here is shrimping. And in Niceville especially, there's a big spot where you can go and buy shrimp off the boats. It's as fresh as it can be without catching it yourself. And then there's also a lot of seafood markets. There's Emerald Isle in Crestview, and there's a bunch all over the place. And if you see people out here with a sign that says fresh shrimp, they're probably telling you the truth. It's not a ruse. And it's really cool because the shrimp is, and the fish in general, it is locally sourced, it's locally caught, and so you're helping sustain local businesses, which I'm a big fan of. You probably already knew that, but it's a big deal. It's super cool. On the topic of seafood, number six is the shrimp boil. Now, shrimp boil is both an activity and a product. So a shrimp boil activity is very much like an all-day backyard barbecue, but instead of, or sometimes in addition to, a barbecue grill, you have giant cauldrons full of water in which shrimp, andouille sausage, potatoes, corn, crawfish, whatever, all the things get boiled. And shrimp boil, the product, is either a powder that you throw in or a giant tea bag that gets tossed in the pot to season everything. And it's a little bit spicy. It's like Old Bay, but it's actually good. Controversial opinion, Old Bay is terrible. But it's similar to that, but it just tastes better. And you'll have, these would be family events. My aunt throws a shrimp boil a couple of times a year. And then there are also charity events. There's a crawfish boil every year in Fort Walton Beach. They raise money for various things. So if you see one of those hand-painted crawfish boil or shrimp boil or crab boil signs with a crudely drawn arrow pointing one direction or another, it's probably legit. It's probably a small community thing or an organization trying to raise money by selling it in the big styrofoam containers. Check one out when you're here, please. That's really, really good. Number 7 is beach culture. Like I said a few minutes ago, I am from Northern Virginia, and going to the beach was an all-day affair. It was a weekend trip because the beach was several hours away. I drive past the beach on my way home from work now, practically. It's at most a 5-minute detour. So the idea of of people at the office. Hey, do you guys want to go to the beach after work? Yes, I do. And then you do. There are many occasions when on my way home or on my way to whatever, I want to go to the beach and sit there and just watch the water, or go to Lions Park in Niceville and just enjoy the water. And that's one of the big reasons I moved here, is it doesn't have to be an all-day affair. It can just be, I feel like going to the beach on my lunch break. It's really cool. So going along with beach culture is the concept of the beach bag. Your beach bag is what you keep all your beach stuff in, and it lives in your car like almost all year. So in your beach bag, you want to get your beach towel, you want your swimsuit, you also need sunscreen, and then like I'll keep a bottle of water in there and a spare pair of sunglasses, and then all the same stuff again for my husband. So if we feel like going to the beach, we could be in Fort Walton Beach or Destin or wherever, Pensacola, for any reason, and be like, hey, you want to go to the beach for a couple hours? Yes, I do. And then all of our stuff is right there. And we also have a beach umbrella and 2 beach chairs that we keep in the back of the vehicle because it's an SUV. It has room for it. And if you get a beach umbrella, you need to get one of the ones that has the giant screw on the bottom so you can actually twist it into the sand so it doesn't fall down. Learn from my mistake. That's just kind of a weird experience for me, the idea that I have this thing that I carry around with me everywhere because there's a better than even chance that I might go to the beach this week, so I need to be prepared. And I recommend that to anyone who's going to spend time down here, whether you're going to move here or you're just going to be vacationing here. Beach bag, definitely have one. Mine is actually a $2 Michaels reusable shopping bag because they're nice and big and square, hashtag not sponsored, but they're very big and sturdy, and because they're made of plastic, if you get a lot of sand in it, you can just dump it out on the driveway and hose it out and it's fine. So that's the beach bag. And then the last thing that really surprised me about moving to Florida was weather watching. I have never met a more weather aware group of people in my life. When I lived in Northern Virginia, the only time I really paid attention to the weather was when we were expecting snow. So maybe 2 months out of the year, I needed to pay attention. Around here, everyone I know that's lived here more than a couple months has the weather app installed on their phone, and they actually check it regularly. A water cooler topic of conversation around here is, did you see the weather report this morning? And people will ask you with the same degree of enthusiasm as, did you see the big game last night? I don't know sports, so whatever game you want, put it in there. I was kind of surprised, like, what do you mean the radar? Are we under attack? No, it's just the storms. We get storm bands here. So if you've ever seen one of those pictures of a hurricane and you see how it's got like the middle part and then it's got like an arm and another, and it's very scary looking. Well, storms come in bands here. They get broken up as they go along, but we'll get like an hour of rain and 2 hours of sun and 3 hours of rain and 1 hour of sun. And it just happens. So you need to pay attention to that. If you're going to go to the beach or a water park, you could be in for like, maybe we should wait half an hour. And one of the other things that's fun about that is that if you go to one of the water parks, whether that's like Big Kahuna's in Destin or you go out to Shipwreck Island in Panama City, is it'll start raining and the tourists who don't know that the weather's gonna change in half an hour will leave the park. And then you can have situations where you sat underneath one of the awnings for an hour and ate your lunch, and then it was sunny and there's like no line. So definitely keep an eye on the weather. It is a normal part of this world. Those of us who live up north in Crestview, where we don't really have to worry about storm surge and the scarier parts of the hurricanes in general, we still keep an eye. We still keep an eye on the weather because we need to know if it's going to storm. We need to know if we need just our umbrellas, or do you need your galoshes, or should you get your raincoat? And yes, you don't have snow gear. You do have various levels of like water gear, rain gear. So I think that's all I've got for today. Thank you for sticking through to the end of the video. And if you enjoyed this, please don't forget to do all of those things every YouTuber in the history of YouTube asks you to do. The liking, the sharing, the subscribing, the commenting. If you're interested in moving here, please reach out no matter how you want to, whether that's a message on this video, calling the number that's going to appear or maybe is already on the screen. And yeah, give me a chance to help you make my hometown your hometown. Have a great day.